13 of Gamechanger sessions, our weekly live stream that we created to shine the light and share the wisdom of brilliant minds and warm hearts as we navigate these uncertain and exponential times. I actually can't believe it's already 13 weeks since COVID forced us all into quarantine. On our show, we've had some amazing guests, including Boris Wertz, venture investor, Minister Baines, our innovation minister, Roger Martin, Margaret Atwood, and now quite a few, 13 to be exact, after today. And today I am really delighted to be hosting somebody who is running an organization that has had a tremendous impact on my life. Sonia Sennik is our guest. She is the executive director of the Creative Destruction Lab, which is a seed stage program for massively scalable science-based companies that I am truly honored to be associated with. Sonia is responsible for making this program run. She is CDL's strategic, operational, and programmatic leader, is responsible for that leadership and really make sure this lab runs incredibly well across all of its campuses. Sonia has a perfect background for this. She has an engineering background. She ran really large-scale projects at a global engineering firm called Hatch, and she has an MBA and an engineering degree. I should say Sonia also is awesome at rugby and gives back to the community and getting people active, which is people need that more than ever. But we are so excited to have Sonia here talking about how this phenomenal program has really come together to help around COVID's recovery. So welcome, Sonia. Really great to have you.
Hey, Candice. It's good
How's it going? Yeah, great to see you too. How you doing today?
Awesome. Hot. Like it's very hot in Toronto, but otherwise awesome.
It is true. I turned the fan off in the room that I'm hosting this in, and I'm now like, oh, it's going to most probably be 40 degrees by the end of this. So if I start sweating, you know why. It's not because of you.
I'm rethinking the tweed for today, I'll be honest.
Yes, I hear you. Hence the short sleeve. Well, it's amazing to have you here. As you know, I have been a part of Creative Destruction Lab for many years now. I can't believe it. It's most probably close to 4 to 5 years that I've been officially associated with the lab, and certainly been actively watching it from when it started. And, Creative Destruction Lab for me has played such a huge impact in my life as somebody who's really passionate about creating the future, and not just the future, but the one that we want, and having the exposure and the access that CDL has given me. And so I thought, one of the things we should start with is really just a deep dive on what the heck is Creative Destruction Lab. How do you describe it? It's certainly changed since when it started. So, let's start with, what it is.
For sure. So Creative Destruction Lab is a nonprofit organization that delivers an objectives-based program for massively scalable seed stage science and technology-based companies. The mission of CDL is to accelerate the commercialization of science for the betterment of humankind. It's a 9-month program that operates and exists in academic institutions. So we're in 8 sites globally, 5 across Canada: University of Toronto, UBC, University of Calgary, University of Montreal, and Dalhousie. We're at the University of Oxford in the UK, HEC Paris in France, and also Georgia Tech in Atlanta.
Amazing. So can we just hone in on the mission? Because it's so big, and it's truly, in terms of the organizations and communities that I'm a part of, it's one that has one of the most inspiring missions and has brought together some of the most incredible humans who are involved in innovation. So can you just deep dive on what that actually means?
Absolutely. So basically the thesis of CDL is that, let's start with this. If you're standing in outer space, you're looking down at planet Earth, you ask the map to show you, the capital flow to early stage tech companies. You see this massive spike over Silicon Valley, maybe a hill over Boston, a hill over New York. But if you're in the same spot in outer space and you ask the map to show you the location of scientific breakthroughs, the whole map would light up. So, the economist who started the lab, Professor Ajay Agarwal, sought to answer the question, why are these two maps so different? Why are there great ideas everywhere and research and development happening all over the world, but they're being commercialized in such a narrow area of the world? And there's typically three answers to that question that you'll get. The first is, well, Silicon Valley, they just have better ideas, which just empirically is not true if you reference academic journals. The second is, capital. As you know, capital is globally available. And many governments have actually done experiments where they have, injected capital into tech ecosystems with little to no results. And by results, I mean a very small percentage of that capital investment resulted in a massively scalable business. And the third answer you typically get is hustle or effort, which could be part of the story, but by no means can make up for that whole gap. So the thesis of the CDL is it's none of these three things. It's actually a failure in the market for high quality judgment. So what is judgment? An entrepreneur wakes up in the morning, they have a list of 1,000 things they need to do to build their business. They only have the time, energy, and resource to pick three things from that list of 1,000 things. The act of picking from the list of 1,000 things, though, requires judgment. And there's varying types of judgment. There's lawyers, there's venture capitalists, there's entrepreneurs, there's business school professors. And at CDL, we believe at the seed stage, the most valuable type of judgment that a young company can receive is that from someone who's done it before. So entrepreneurial judgment, someone who's taken an idea, scaled it, operated a business. Over decades, they've reprioritized that list and then maybe exited in some sort of liquidity event. They've developed that muscle of judgment. They've developed that muscle of prioritization. So if you can think of CDL sort of as doing one thing, it's we create the marketplace for judgment. On the supply side, we have experienced entrepreneurs, investors, scientists like yourself. And on the demand side, you have basically people with great ideas that have never built a business before. And so we put them through a 9-month program that's very structured, it's objectives based, and it's a competitive process. The mentors, you can speak to your experience as a mentor of, effectively selecting which companies you want to continue investing your most precious resource in, which is your time, session over session. And the companies through that process, the mentors get to see a movie of the company as opposed to a picture or a slide deck. They get to see how do they respond to reprioritizing these objectives? How do they respond to coaching? How do they respond to, pivoting and the rest of it? You get to see that over an extended period of time. And that just is really informative on both sides of the market.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. And I can just echo everything you said as a mentor. What's so remarkable about this program is one, the quality of people, right? Like ultimately CDL is also just a network of the smartest, most inspiring, innovative people. And it's both a combination of the startups themselves, but as you say, it's in this diversity that the judgment gets so good, right? Because you have the scientists and you have the technologists and you have the venture capitalists and you have the entrepreneur, and collectively that diversity gives you this really great judgment, and it's a great framework. So, I've certainly gone a lot. I've invested in a few CDL companies through our angel fund. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about the kinds of technologies that you're commercializing at CDL, just to give a context for people? Because, one thing for me that was a big reason why I wanted to join is after operating, to your point, a startup and taking it from, the seed plus stage to Series D and being laser focused on just one startup succeeding, right? And scaling, a lot. Like we raised 75 million in capital. This is Wattpad and grew the team, etc. I realized that there's all of these new technologies. There's machine learning, especially in 2017, and blockchain and quantum and all of these new technologies that are going to change the world. And I wanted to understand how they were going to impact the world. And CDL has been the biggest learning, resource for me in getting access to this to do so. So maybe talk a little bit about just the kinds of streams at CDL.
For sure. And That's just awesome. So thank you for sharing that. Also on the learning side, I think we talk about CDL as sort of postcards from the future sometimes,
Yeah.
And actually in the machine learning stream, so CDL started as a general stream at the University of Toronto in 2012. And then a few years later, they saw an influx of sort of ML applications or optimizations applied to different areas. And there was enough of a concentration of it that they started the first AI stream in 2015 and started scaling. Since then, we have a quantum stream in Toronto. We have a space stream related to space technologies. Our founding fellows, Chris Hadfield. We have we have an energy stream at CDL Rockies. We have 2 health streams at CDL West this year and 2 health streams at CDL Toronto this year. We also have a supply chain stream. So in addition to the AI stream in Montreal, we started a supply chain stream. We have an ocean stream in Halifax. You're probably getting the sense that we play to sort of the local area, strengths of the local areas as well. And we're launching a matter stream this fall in Toronto as well, which is focused on materials and molecular material design. And so we've basically, we're talking about the types of technologies. It's really, we've taken the CDL model and then just focused it in on different areas and applied it, put together the marketplace of the mentors, the top mentors, in energy, and scouring the earth for the most promising ventures in energy and put them together through the CDL process. And then we've sort of repeated that and we tested the specialization. And what we found was it really makes it a potent experience from both sides of the marketplace, where, you have best in the world traveling, will travel for a combination of, their fellow peers in the room, as well as
when we could travel.
Fair enough. Okay, so we did do the digital transformation. Should we go there now?
For sure. So we'll definitely talk about that. But I think that's awesome. That gives you a really good context. So as you can imagine, when COVID hit, I think people who are entrepreneurial and who have agency are like propelled into action, right? It's like, how can I help? What can I do? I know for myself, that's when we started Gamechanger sessions, because I had this belief that mindset and mental models of the smartest people I know should be shared around how to deal with, figuring out how to live in this uncertainty, as well as figuring out what the future is going to look like post-COVID. And so one of the first things I did actually was write you and a letter, or an email, I should say. We are digital right now. And I said, how do we get CDL to do something? There's no better group of people in the world, possibly in the world, certainly in Canada, this community of entrepreneurs and innovators to really help figure out what to do about COVID. And of course, you were already on it, right? So, tell us a little bit more about what you guys have done in a record amount of time globally to actually help startups that are focusing on solving which problems around COVID. Maybe you can sort of talk a bit about that.
For sure. And we were working on it. And I will say that emails from yourself and other mentors like Neil Wainwright and Mike Strabinus also just was telling us, it's signaling like our mentors are ready to roll up their sleeves and work on this. And it just kept us totally motivated to do it as quickly as we could. And so what we'll say about the CDL recovery program is it effectively is we've taken the CDL model, and it's typically an 8-week cycle that we have our sessions in. We basically compressed it into 4 weeks instead of 8 weeks. And we also specialize the streams in either public health or economic recovery. So we're running 2 streams in parallel this summer. The other innovation that we added to the program is a series of intake sessions. So from the first week of May until the first week of July, we have run an intake session every week. And the intake session are a combination of companies, ventures. And I want to say one other thing is this is the first program we've done where we've opened it up beyond seed stage. So we've included not-for-profit organizations, sole researchers, scientists, innovation teams from large corporates, established, series B, C, D type companies as well, because, the urgency of the problem is so great that we thought, let's open it up as much as we can to see how much our community can just, click in to support. And so we added these intake sessions where effectively the mentors meet the companies for the first time, and that's our final effectively selection process before the companies are advanced to either the public health or economic recovery streams.
So, one of the big questions, right, or one of the big comments that a Jay made that I think is really striking is the economic cost, right, of us living in a world where we are all bound to our homes. And I mean, we are still in Toronto in stage one, right? Like we're just about to, maybe Vaughan's already in stage two. And I think he estimated that the monthly cost of the crisis ranges from $350 billion globally to $1 trillion for the US alone, right? And these costs are significant. And one of the things that is so interesting to me and such a profound statement that the lab made, and certainly something I've thought as well, is if we knew who had COVID, there would be no economic crisis. And so, I would love to go into depth around what is CDL doing, especially as it relates to your information thesis. So, I know that you certainly have a lot of different companies, but you decided to choose information as the first filter. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like a bit more detail on why information?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started the program, we had a very broad scope. So we said we're going to take in information-based solutions and PPE type manufacturing type solutions and vaccine type solutions. And after the first 2 or 3 intakes, we learned a lot. We learned a lot about what the mentor saw would be feasible, also where the expertise lay in our mentor pool, and how CDL and the companies, the ventures that we were letting into the program, could most effectively drive the information-based problem forward. And so our academic leadership team, Professors Ajay Agarwal, Joshua Gans, who is our chief economist, Professor Avi Goldfarb, who's our chief data scientist, and Professor Mara Letterman, who's this site lead at CDL Toronto. The 4 of them really sharpened the thesis to the information-based solutions, and actually they were able to put it so succinctly that we put it in front of our mentors, and immediately our operations team, our venture team, and we started to see this flow of opportunities. And so I want to sort of talk you through how they got to it, if that's okay. So there's sort of 2 extremes for when the COVID crisis will end. There's the good outcome, which is, we achieve wide-scale distribution of a vaccine or treatment to develop herd immunity before the end of 2020. The bad outcome, which is, we achieve none of these before the end of 2023. Of course, we hope for the good outcome, but the program is designed to prepare for the bad outcome. And so it's about managing through the bad outcome. There's 2 types of solutions that apply to the management problem. There's information-based solutions, which are predicting who is infectious, who is immune, and then developing tools to leverage this information for contingent decision making. So if X is true, then do A, otherwise do B. So if the system finds out that someone in the office, for example, has a high temperature, then security is asked to direct them to a testing station for more examination. The other type of solution is an always-on solution. These are blunt instruments that apply to everyone. The one that we are the most familiar with, of course, is the lockdown. It's PPE, sanitization, physical barriers like plexiglass, and sort of just they're much more broad. And so CDL Recovery, the program, is focused on the full stack of information-based solutions to accelerate the world's recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. So that could be contact tracing, swab-based tests that predict if COVID is present, image analysis, symptom monitoring, workplace monitoring, etc.
Super helpful. I mean, I have to say, as a business leader, what becomes so clear, right, is that you literally have to make a decision. And this decision, right, about how you go back to work or how you bring business back or people back into your establishments or anything, you have to assume all of that liability and all of that risk, and there's a massive trade-off and cost to not getting back to work, especially if you are not a digital first organization. And sometimes I'm in my own little bubble because so much of my work is virtual that I forget, how important these decisions really are for the majority of the entire world. And so I just think like this focus on information, I want to dive like a lot deeper into the incredible innovations that we're seeing around all of these different tools. So let's dive in. Let's first start with just public health in general versus the economic recovery. What are you seeing? What's getting you excited as a part of the lab in terms of how very smart entrepreneurs are innovating around these, information-based solutions?
For sure. So in the public health stream, effectively, it's solutions that produce new information related to public health, clinical health, or consumer health and wellness. The types of technologies are sort of bucketed into two. One is testing, and one is therapeutics and therapeutic development. But if you go even deeper into testing, because I'll give you some examples of some companies that are doing some really interesting work there, there's sort of four areas within testing. There's direct individual testing, so identifying the presence of the virus in the sample. There's individual serological testing, so identify that a person has developed antibodies to the virus and therefore has had it. Environmental testing, so testing to see the presence and abundance of the virus, and therefore, being able to track and trace, was it in my workplace or this area of wherever you are. I will say that we've seen mostly wastewater applications around the environmental testing. We also have comorbidity testing, so identifying comorbidities that make the tested individual at higher risk for severe COVID. So those are the four categories. And I'd say, there's two companies specifically that I just come to mind pretty much, immediately. One is currently doing, a paper-based test. They previously were doing it to focus on the Zika virus, and they have since pivoted it to adapt it to COVID-19 testing. And so the idea is, can it be rapid, reliable, and low cost, because the volume of the testing that's required is so great. So that's sort of a great example there of, they also started as, a nonprofit, thinking this is going to be quicker for us to get licenses and go through the approval process. Through the program, they've been able to collaborate with the mentors on figuring out, a really strong incorporation strategy to get there at the same sort of speed, if not faster. So that's one of the examples there.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And are you finding that now that we're global, CDL, you're seeing more innovation in certain areas around this? Like, are certain countries more likely to produce public health testing versus others?
So we haven't seen, we've had applications from over, I think, 45 or 50 countries. And our application, since we announced the program in early April, I think we've had over 600 applications at this point. And so it's been widely distributed. I would say there hasn't been a significant spike anywhere, aside from, of course, our sites. This is also, I should have mentioned, our first truly global program, in that typically CDL exists sort of, in Calgary for energy and prime, or in Toronto for quantum and space and AI, or in Montreal. And, because we're fully digital through the virtual CDL platform, all of our mentors across all of the sites are collaborating together, and we're bringing in our ventures from all over the world digitally. So we've been able to have some really cool examples of, mentors from all over the world. For example, we have a Halifax-based company that has a wearable solution for location-based monitoring in long-term care homes. And the mentors that they've met through the program and worked with are helping them expand across Canada, as well as helping them expand in Europe, which has been really exciting to see.
Very cool. So when you think about these four different kinds of testing, are there ones that are emerging as better than the others? Or do you see this as a combination of testing that public health is going to require? Or as time has progressed, it's kind of obvious that some are better than others?
I think I don't think we know yet. I will say that I think there's a lot, it's not that there's so much innovation in the traditional sense. We are seeing a significant redeployment of existing innovations. So, I'd say our top challenge is, in the context of recovery and public health, is identifying which of these repurposed initiatives can address the information problem and scale fast enough to really have an impact. That would probably be the biggest focus. And I don't know the distribution as far as the types, but I'd say that, of anything that's being pivoted right now, that's the biggest challenges because there's such a global focus on it right now.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely going to be one of my questions, which is, one of the things we talk about around innovation is just exponential scale, right? So obviously the virus is showing us how exponential scale works. I think the entire world is getting an education in sort of exponential math. But what's also interesting is that the market for innovation around COVID recovery solutions is very, very competitive because people around the world are really focused on solving this problem. So what is the advice that, other than, I know I'm one voice in the lab, but what is some of the advice that you're hearing from mentors around, figuring out product market fit? And does it actually make sense for companies that were working on Zika to pivot at this time if they do have something for COVID? Or how are you navigating the opportunistic players that are entrepreneurs who want to maybe access funding or be opportunistic around solving this versus ones that are really, really strong? And as you said, I think you mentioned three things there: low cost, what were they? Low
Reliable.
cost, repeatable, and reliable.
Yeah.
How are you thinking? What are you hearing in the lab around that?
From our perspective, which is, sort of the CDL team, which I want to say as well, this has come to life because I just mentioned that the global community of mentors has come together. The global team of CDL across all the sites has been working tirelessly to put this together, and they've been incredible. Our operations, our venture team, our leadership team, our academic team, it's been amazing. And I'll say us, we have the benefit of sort of observing the marketplace behave, sort of we put it together, run the sessions, really structure the program. And so I'll say what I've heard in the room from the mentors is exactly what you mentioned, which is they have their antenna up on making sure that the company is being very clear on where they can make the most impact. And it could be to stay doing what they're doing. And so that is a question that is asked and deliberated and talked about. And, it brings up some really great natural frictions in the room of, as you mentioned, so in the CDL room, you have anyone from a public health specialist, the VP, RI of innovation, to, a partner at BC, to, an exited entrepreneur, all sort of weighing in on the applicability in the space. And so that conversation comes up a lot. And I think it's the advice is always just, it's very authentic and honest of, where can you make the most, does this make sense? And let's talk about, if it does, let's talk about how it does, and then and go from there. And so it's definitely conversations coming up a lot.
For sure. Are you seeing collaborations? Like, are you seeing the application of maybe a few startups coming together to actually solve the problem with more accuracy? And is that something that is part of the thesis, that it's not just one type of testing that's going to kind of get us out of this? It's actually a community and the network effect of many.
So actually, it's funny that you asked that. One of the companies that's in the program that 3-4 months ago, they were a hackathon company. They weren't even a company. They came together through a hackathon. They have since come through the program, and they've underwent an acquisition process with the guidance of CDL mentors to develop an opportunity to scale more rapidly. They basically do a social distancing sort of radar that measures and gamifies users' social distancing experiences and hygiene practices. They're initially sort of targeting reopening workplaces. And I feel like, the timeline in which they were able to go from, a hackathon to an acquired, an acquisition basically is, that's been remarkable. And I think we'll see more of that. I think through the program, there's lots of opportunities. And one of the things you hear the mentors say in the room as well is, this does pair nicely with company, XYZ that's doing ABC. And that's something that is, again, the benefit of seeing it over those intake sessions and over the course of time is that familiarity of what else is in the innovation space and where the bar of competition is and where the opportunities are, because it is all in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for public health. Who's the main target buyer for these public health solutions that the customers are focusing on? And are there any insights around how those buyers are responding to this crisis, or are they, because I imagine different governments are, very different in terms of how they're procuring solutions, as well as different public health organizations. Can you highlight any insights around go to market for these companies?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that it's a very, very broad problem. So the consumers are very broad. It's a combination of public and private. We are in the early part of the commercialization journey, and what we have seen with regards to testing, for example, of course, there's a very well-established regulatory process, but there's been two significant changes. One is the speed at which things are being approved and at which they're happening through, for example, Public Health Canada. It's really moving faster than they've ever moved. I think just from that's feedback from some of the professors engaged in the program. And second, just interesting discussions around privacy and the apps, right? Because a lot of this is digital and app based. And so it's not necessarily like decisions have been made that are changing policy, but right now the conversations have been opened for using data in different ways. And that in and of itself is a byproduct of innovation of this period of time.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I think we're seeing is that the organizations that have invested in their stack for data and digital are certainly able to move much faster than others, and it's really causing like a massive gap in terms of how fast things can be deployed. I think we're seeing that broadly. Let's move to where I think a lot of people are, which are not necessarily focused on public health only, but the economic recovery, the information solutions that CDL is focusing on that help business get back, right, to work. I'm fascinated by this because I think there was actually a very good comment that was made in the MIT article about your program, which said, CEOs are going to, in the next phase of COVID-19 recovery, many CEOs of large enterprises will begin to behave like presidents and prime ministers. Can you elaborate on that as it relates to economic recovery and sort of, then we'll dive deep into what we're seeing there?
For sure. So as we all know, policy has been set by our governments to take care of a really large and complex issue. As back to work evolves and as companies start to bring their people back to work, and CEOs are going to be making decisions to set policy. They're going to be monitoring their own curves. They're going to be monitoring their cases and the health of their employees. They're going to be monitoring, access, throughput in stores of their customers, and that in and of itself is sort of the same set of issues in the scale of their business. And so there's going to need to be that information will feed into sort of strategic management opportunities. And so that, again, is what fed us into thinking this was the right spot for the program to be, is the set of mentors having the expertise that they have in running large organizations and making big decisions. And also just we're digital. I mean, we have such a large concentration of AI-based companies and database companies. We thought this is really where we can help these companies thrive and help these solutions really get to market as quickly as they can.
For sure. So let's share some of the amazing innovations that you're seeing in this stream. It would be great if you could name a couple of companies that are really focused on helping organizations use this information in novel ways. What are you seeing that's exciting?
For sure. So first, I'll just sort of say generally about the economic recovery stream. It's technologies that generate information on whether groups of individuals are infectious, immune, or susceptible to the virus. And it focuses on a solution in non-healthcare settings, such as workplaces or transit, for example. The types of problems are engaging in commerce and return to work. And three big buckets are sort of symptom monitoring. So we see several symptom monitoring companies. The greatest value here may be to businesses as the requirements for compliance moves from policymakers to the private sector. Digital health, so mostly risk assessment tools and contact tracing, and then sanitation. So there's UV type companies and that type of thing. We've actually had two go to market in the period of time that we've been running the program. and the program runs until the end of August. And then we're actually going to carry on with the program in the stream at our CDL Atlanta site. So we will continue with a fully digital program around recovery in the fall. So there's one that is a consumer app that has currently, upwards of 55, 60K users that help identify when places like a grocery store are too busy. We also have, a wearable company that's in the process of delivering somewhere between 5 and 10,000 units to customers now, with thousands of other orders pending.
And what does the wearable company do? What is their focus?
Their focus is on, it's a contact tracing type company.
Oh, it's also a contact tracing, a wearable one. So, yeah, got it. So an app that, sorry.
Primarily. Yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting. And, what are you finding are some of the biggest barriers for these startups right now? I mean, what's interesting is like there's never been more urgency to get to market, right? And yet it's also like, CDL is like a seed stage program, right? It's early. So what barriers are these companies facing? How are you helping address that?
So I'd say, this is a really hard and complex problem, as everybody knows. I think the biggest problem is just, the barrier, is it's such a big problem that, as we mentioned before, the focus is so heavy all around the world, the competition is very high. So I'd say just initially that. I'd say, then it's the information and the data gap. What is the wave data to inform the response, and how do you design your tools, your services, your products around the data that you'll have available to you now or in the future. And then, of course, there's regulatory approvals, finding the right partners to commercial grade production, and, partnerships for distribution as well. And distribution in and of itself, you just trickle down, and there's so many new types of problems. And with that, of course, is the greatest opportunity for innovation. So it comes full circle, and that innovation is so needed because there's so many changing and dynamic problems that are presented to all of us.
Yeah. No, I think there's the duality of this situation is very clear as it relates to that. I will say, it's interesting. I've always loved innovation. I've always been focused on the future, but I went to business school and not everybody was, right? So I have friends. A great example is a friend of mine who's been in real estate for many years, and she's always been curious what I'm doing, but never before has she been more interested in the solutions that I'm finding so her buildings can open up again, right? So she's like, no, send me everything you got. I want to meet everyone, because it is truly a new sense of urgency to have that information so that they are not causing, any issues, and there's so much risk and liability, right? That's that people who own enterprise or space face if they don't have this information, and if they're not actually, predicting solutions that will help. So I think that's super, super interesting.
Yeah, I think another way of saying the barrier is, oh, sorry, Candice. I was going to say just another way of saying the barrier is the barrier is the nature of the problem itself. Like there's an incomplete picture at all times. And that is, for the innovators, the researchers, the scientists, the investors, as well as the business owners, from small to large scale corporations to, our entire, public health system and public services. It's just the nature of the nature of the problem itself is the barrier, I'd say.
I think that's a very good point. One of the other areas that I think is interesting, what I was going to say is, we take questions. So if anybody has any questions for Sonia or for this discussion, please put them in the Slack, in the Zoom chat, not the Slack chat. I'm used to that for CDL. Yeah. I'm
that's the CDL muscle.
I'm you, exactly, in the Zoom chat. We're happy to answer those in a few minutes. But one of the other interesting barriers or tricky things in this is privacy. And I'm really, really interested and curious around how CDL is mentoring, or the guidance we're providing, or you're hearing, obviously not just CDL, but the mentors, about how to address this. Because I think this is one of the interesting things about COVID, is that the value systems are changing. What may have been considered not okay in a value system around privacy, those boundaries are being pushed. And I'm curious if you have any insights from the lab on how that's manifesting.
Yeah, again, I'd say the privacy has been a huge topic of discussion and a concern area among the mentors. Ensuring that the ventures are responsible with the information they're collecting on employees has been a huge topic of discussion. And I think the signal that I'll just report is just it is being talked about. It's being really considered as they're mentoring and guiding the companies. And I can't speak to, there's obviously not been any changes broadly, but I think it's being talked about in a new way.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just have a few minutes left, and I do want to, really talk a little bit about your team and what you guys have pulled together. And I want to frame it in leadership in crisis. Ultimately, you were able to, CDL is usually winding down sort of at the point that you got started. Everyone's exhausted. It's like you guys have an amazing team. You usually are like, I think it's June where we have our big super session, and it's like a big event, and then it like shuts down. But instead, you decided to like tell or mobilize these troops to actually like literally do an even bigger, session in service of this wonderful mission. Can you just talk about like how you led this team and what some of the lessons or advice you have for other entrepreneurs and business leaders around leading in crisis here? And obviously I want to give a huge shout out to your team because I know they've done a phenomenal job coming together. But let's hear what advice you have, because you've clearly done it
Awesome.
well.
Well, yeah, first I'll just say you're exactly right. We were on the ramp down going into session 3, session 4. Because of the cutting process at CDL, it's a competitive process. Typically we have about a 50% graduation rate. So by session 3, you have maybe 60% of the companies. By session 4, maybe 50% or so. And we put on our first fully virtual sessions at session 3 for CDL Atlantic. That was our very first one. And the way that team came together and just did anything it took to make sure everybody was onboarded, like short of physically taking a computer to one of their mentors' houses, to make sure everybody could seamlessly get onto the platform, wasn't going to miss their meetings, didn't have any issues sort of technologically, just hundreds of hours of training and onboarding to bring it together. In parallel, we built and released our CDL community portal. So we've digitized the experience for our venture information, our communication system, our note-taking system, our scheduling. So you're receiving all your schedules now through one place. That was, our technology team was enormously, they were so driven. And so I think it was, always making sure that we knew why it was so important. And it was important every single session we had from the tail end of the 2019-2020 program year. It was these companies, they've never needed this community more. They've never needed these meetings more. They've never needed these discussions more. They are going through something they could never even have imagined they would go through. And that was enough. We have such a fantastic set of people and talented group across the entire network. That was enough for everybody to do, like I said, whatever it took, to make it happen. We changed the way that we worked with each other, for each other, and for our community, and it's been a really fantastic journey. So having that happen, and it gave us the confidence, I think, being able to put on the 2019-2020 session 3 and session 4 across all our sites virtually. The session 4 cycle, just the session 3 was a CDL Atlantic. I think that gave us the confidence that this recovery program, it's compressed, it's fast paced, but the belief that we could do it, because we sort of had set the rails in place. So yeah, huge hats off to the team. It was it's been an incredible couple of months.
Yeah. And I just want to say hats off to you in sort of leading a massive transformation to virtual. And, I just, before we sort of end there, I think it's really relevant, right? As we see so many companies, right, because we don't have the information, because these startups, right, in public health and in economic recovery are still figuring stuff out, we are still like forced to be virtual. And I think like your lessons around moving from the thing about CDL is it was an in-person program. Part of it was like the magic of it was really around this every 8 weeks. I think it was 8 weeks, right? 8 weeks.
8 weeks, yeah.
Every 8 weeks, I would, come to Rotman and I would spend like 2 days with these amazing people and feel like really connected. And part of it was the networking and the spontaneous collisions that sort of happened that I look forward to. And clearly the snacks, absolutely. You're actually right. I love it. Now that I think about it, the snack basket. But what's been so interesting is that you moved to virtual very, very quickly with very limited business interruption. I would love for the next just few minutes to just share what have you learned on taking something that was really focused on community gathering in a physical space to virtual. What are some of the big insights or takeaways that you have for other people who are trying to shift their business practices virtual?
Yeah, I think that the starting point was just what is at the core and heart of what we do, and what is at the core and heart of a great experience for our ventures and our mentors and our scientists and our MBA students. What do we need to make sure we protect as we move this digitally, and what can we even enhance? I'd say even the way that we're able to navigate and manage through our sets of, we have very rapid meetings. We've innovated so many times. We've taken feedback from our mentors. So the thing to do is first just start with your core values and be relentless about protecting them as you're designing something new. And even if it takes 10 times the staff you originally thought it would take, we had, the benefit of just amazing leadership and engagement across all the sites. It was everybody pitched in. People were getting up at 3 a.m. because the time zone difference for doing, our Oxford session was such, or, and they just, that was just their workday. And that just, the flexibility and adaptability, and then recognizing, recognizing the team and making sure that every step of the way, even though you're moving so quickly, you have to take moments to celebrate. You have to take moments to say, hey, we just saw the mentors. I remember the first sort of session we had, we saw all the tiles and all of the faces of our mentors ready with the microphones working and everything. It was just, it was a real sense of satisfaction, I think, for the whole team to think, okay, they're here. Now we need to just make sure we protect that experience. And so, like I said, at the very beginning, your core values, what do you need to make sure you never compromise on what you deliver? And then opportunities to enhance. And so we've been able to innovate in the virtual space, and, going virtually meant going global in a lot of senses, and a lot of cross-site pollination, and, connecting ventures with mentors even more quickly than we would have instead of waiting for super session to match them in a room, and so there's those advantages too. Of course, there's the trade-off of not being able to sort of socialize, see each other, and, have that face-to-face connection. But yeah.
No, that's such good insight and very, very valuable advice, because I think you clearly have done a remarkable job. And you've innovated too. I remember the first session, I nearly wanted to die from the length of trying to do CDL virtually. By the end, I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. But you pivoted. You're like, yeah, we get that. You cannot be on a Zoom screen from 8:30 till 6:30 in one session, but you shifted it, And so I think that's the other piece that I'm just being super inspired by, is just how much you've innovated, how much you've pivoted. So I know I want to turn it over to some questions that we have from our community. Let's start with the first one. Somebody here is really, it's Karen is asking, can you comment on fintech and sort of the role of information as it relates to fintech? Didn't hear much about that industry just broadly at CDL, as well as, I guess, with recovery.
So yeah, I'd say we have had many fintech companies in our general streams, as well as we have our blockchain stream as well at CDL Toronto. I'd say we haven't had, we've had a few payments type solutions in the program as well, a handful in the CDL recovery program. Some of our alumni actually that they've developed sort of tracing and micropayment systems for remote areas, and that then when they're originally in the program, and they graduated now with recovery and the COVID efforts. They've been expanding that to, okay, now there's a whole swath of people in established areas, not remote areas. They were doing marketplaces and things like that in Africa. Now there's a whole bunch of people that are going to be, compromised to go into the bank and sort of applying it there. So we have seen some examples of that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I know I'm completely contactless now. Like I don't touch anything at all. It's pretty wild what transformation has happened there. Another good question is, have you seen any CDL alumni companies? How big is the alumni network today, by the way?
So we have over roughly 2,000 companies in our alumni network at this point.
Amazing. So the question is, have you seen any CDL alumni companies that have pivoted as a result of COVID? What are you noticing? And do you track that? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. As far as a pivot, we've actually seen a collaboration between two CDL alumni companies. There's a company called Care Team and Fleet Ops. They came together to work on intelligent digital assistance systems. So effectively projects that aim to equip community organizations and volunteers to document needs, manage interventions in a coordinated manner, all on a digital platform. And it's just effectively a tool to bring together local stakeholders. So that was really cool for us to see come together.
That's really great. And do you facilitate those interactions? Like, is the platform designed so that alumni companies can collaborate with each other? Is that a new marketplace that could emerge?
Yeah, I'd say, we're just learning right now sort of where we can add the most value for them. That's really been the number one question is, things like Super Session and our sessions, we have many alumni founders that come back now. We have a few alumni associates, who've really successfully gone on to raise, Series A rounds, Series B rounds, and want to give back to the program. So we have a handful of them who are fantastic. Mina from Kepler or Michael Hellender from OTI Lumionics. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, it's just really clicking them back into the network. Super Session also, we always invite our alumni to participate in portions of that. And so, but we don't actually, aside from making sure that they have opportunities to get to know each other or be aware of each other, be in the same room, in our space room, for example, the first year of our space stream, we had a number of companies coming through to session 3 or 4 and starting to be each other's customers or collaborators. And, they were companies from different countries in the world now, procuring with each other, which was really neat to see. So I think there's a lot of natural, organic collaborations that come, but nothing that we're, specifically directing yet.
Yeah. Super interesting. Okay, there's a few more, so I want to get to these and then we're going to wrap up. But, somebody, it's Barry O'Dowd, wondered if you have any Irish collaborators. So maybe you found some people in Ireland that would like to collaborate with this question.
We definitely have a handful of mentors, and I think we've had applications, but no one specific comes to mind. I don't think we have any Irish companies in the program yet. That's not to say they haven't applied, and there's still a couple more intake sessions left, so let's see.
Great. So there's a few more here, and one is just how you get involved. I'm going to say go to Creative Destruction Lab's website for more information. Another one here is, I'm wondering if the virtual CDL platform could help with sourcing a broader input, especially from scientists or other subject matter experts.
That is a great question. And we've found that we're finding that it's working that way. Exactly. So we had, a company, for example, in one of our CDL Oxford companies working in the genomic space. And we had an alumni founder, Brendan from Deep Genomics. Actually, he was able to join for just that specific company to provide very specific scientific advice. And without accessing him virtually, it would have been, a challenge. They're a Canadian-based company, and so we have found that we're able to curate those connections and provide opportunities to give specialized connections. And so, obviously, the other side of that is you want to make sure that you're narrowing its focus because, more creates your days that felt way too long. So how do we make sure that we're focusing in on the right areas, the right people, the right matches, the right durations, of meetings, engagement, the right information exchanged. And this is helping us do that because we're virtual. we're able to connect in with people so much more rapidly and quickly.
Yeah. Well, this has been so great. My last question for you is, when you talked about the good outcome and the bad outcome, and whether we go back to work at the end of this year or whether it's in 2023, hope not. Do you have more conviction of one or the other at the end of now that you've been so immersed in the innovation that's happening?
Yeah, I'd say that it's been really inspiring to be able to see the innovators and the mentors just rally, like just give so much of their time, attention, and imagination to these problem sets. So I'm really confident, with amazing teams, mentors, ventures, MBA students coming together, the future that we want will arrive, maybe sooner than we think.
Absolutely. Well, that is so great. There's one or two more questions, which I'll throw on social. You can answer if you like on social media as CDL. But a huge thank you. As you know, I'm the lab's biggest fan and feel really, really honored to be a part of it. What did I tell you? I would have a little person who opens my door before the end of the call.
Well, we made it through this without my cat, so. Hello.
There you go. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Gamechanger Session. Sonia, it is so remarkable what you and the team at CDL are doing. So keep doing the amazing work. A huge thank you to all the people who make Gamechanger Sessions happen. So first, I want to thank Either Live for actually doing the production, our executive producer, Corey Marr, our team, Samantha and Maggie and Jerome for helping put this together. And we have amazing partners, CIX, Talk Boutique, Artery, York University, Toronto Life. Thank you so much for being partners with us and bringing these awesome conversations to the community. Next week, Monday, we have a phenomenal guest, Jeffrey West. He is the author of the book Scale, best-selling book. Actually, he's a theoretical physicist who actually looks at scale in nature, in business, and in cities. And obviously, we're going to be talking about the power of scale and its impact as it relates to COVID. So thank you all. Have a wonderful week. See you next week.